You ready? Okay. So I'm going to call the meeting to order and just let you know some scheduling issues. Bobby Rousseau and Steve Arsenault will not be here tonight. Mike Mackin and Mark Erickson have a conflicting meeting that they have to attend that should be relatively brief, and they said they'd be here as soon as they possibly could. Mr. May is here representing the Cemetery Commission to drop something off for our consideration. So what I'd like to do is make a recommendation that we hear Mr. May and then decide whether we want to adjourn and, not try to get anything done tonight, because we did push the town, because we knew we had an attendance problem, we pushed the town manager up till the next meeting, because I wanted to be sure that we had not only a quorum, but a supermajority when she was with us. So if that pleases the committee, I'd like to ask Mr. May to tell us what he wants us to consider, and then we could have that other discussion.
So are we feeling, is it public comment, not agenda?
No, it's an agenda item because we...
Response from committee and boards.
Exactly. So why don't you join us and tell us what you got.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for opening up your meeting early and to take into consideration a printout that I've done that the Cemetery Commission has looked at with regards to the current charter language and feels that in a verse that governs the charter to the cemeteries in Lunenburg, that there is a word missing.
Now, if I can stop you just for a quick second, would you mind just stating your name for the record? I'm sorry.
Are you the secretary?
Yes.
Lance May.
Thank you.
Do you need anything else? And as a result, the Cemetery Commission has gone into doing some research, and in so doing the research realizes that the verbatim language within the current charter is missing one word. And that word is part of the state law governing public cemeteries and public cemetery commissions, and it is with that word, sole, that we feel belongs within that language of the new charter, and we have backed that up with a printout of the state law, administration of the government, Chapter 114, Section 23. We've also included a copy of the town charter, Chapter 113 of the Acts of 2009, page 8 of 22, and we've also included a copy of the section of the town charter, Section 1-3, powers of the town, and in that verbiage it indicates that the Constitution and the laws of the Commonwealth are to be considered within the scope of the charter. And I just want to drop this off for the Charter Commission's consideration to review. And at some point, I know Nancy had suggested that once this review is done, we could be invited back. So I leave that with you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. And if you circulate that to the committee, and we'll take it up as an agenda item at the next meeting, if that's all right.
I'll scan it tonight.
Great.
And I have nothing else.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions? Obviously, we want to review it. So any questions before we let Mr. May leave?
I was just curious, what was the one word?
Sole.
S-O-L-E.
Yeah, S-O-L-E.
Okay.
What section of the charter?
It should be section 3-5?
But as long as you're here, let's take it in case we do have a
Yeah.
obvious question.
Obviously, if you get copies of that, you can...
Yeah.
So is it, so she'll have the sole responsibility?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
That is the state law. And I know how thorough you folks want to be.
No, that's fine.
No, absolutely.
No,
Yeah.
that's good. I appreciate that. All right.
perfect, thank you.
Great, thank you very
Okay,
much,
thank you.
appreciate it.
Stay warm.
Okay, we'll try.
Oops, excuse me. Thank you, Des.
So the question now becomes, do we feel we have enough? We have a quorum, but we don't have enough for any votes at the
See you later,
moment.
Ron.
If we stay for a half hour or so, we will likely have 2 more members, and we could have enough for a vote if we chose to take any votes, but we don't have any particular agenda items. The 2 things that are kind of coming up are the town manager presentation, and then we said at our last meeting that we were going to start going through all the stuff we've discussed before and say, and group them according to the recommendation of Mr. Erickson, that we would group them whether the discussion, the potential discussion was around form and function, spelling or punctuation or something like that, or substantive changes. Again, I leave it to you guys to decide how you want to.
Well, I just have 2 things. One is that I didn't talk at all about the Finance Committee, and I don't know if Mark did, because he wasn't at the meeting, I don't think, when we had the charter discussion.
Okay.
And I think that can wait for the discussion with the town manager, because a lot of what we talked about has a lot to do with what she was bringing to bear as well. And I think in the context of that discussion, one of the things that was that I wanted to spend some more time doing some more searches of town charters to compare. Again, part of what our discussion was, and I think I said this very early on, that the section on finance and the section on town manager just seemed to replicate itself. It just seemed like there was just too much information in terms of the division of finance, in my opinion. But I think it would be interesting to take a look at, since we now have time before the town manager comes, and I know that it's going to be one of the areas of interest that she's going to have, is looking at other town charters to see whether or not we might actually have more in this particular document than we might need in places where we can either refer to bylaws or refer to Mass General law. Because certainly the role of the town accountant is spelled out by the bylaw, by the Mass General law, in terms of what those duties and responsibilities are. So, but anyway, so I would also just want to get that out, and I would encourage people to, if you have a chance, to take a look, to do that. But I'm happy to wait on the Finance Committee discussions. And I think that I would have no problem pushing off until Heather is here.
I'm thinking about the comparison in one way, though, that just because theirs is less doesn't mean it's better.
Oh,
On
I'm
the
not-
flip side, maybe we just did a better job.
But we didn't do that with, like the DPW director. We didn't do that with, there are so many things we didn't do that with. Why did we spell out the job qualifications and responsibilities and scope of duties of everybody working in the finance office, but nobody else?
Well, and
I mean, that was
See,
just...
Bob is our historian.
I know.
My guess is that the original charter was at the same time we were creating the CAFO position and moving from the 3 selectmen, and there was a lot of other stuff going on, and at the time, the most important function was most likely who was going to become the CFO of the town, if you will. And the division between what role the CAFO and/or town manager played vis-a-vis finances versus what role a financial accountant or finance director or whatever the other possibilities are.
Right.
They felt the need to spell that out, whereas the DPW director, everybody kind of
very
knew
defined role.
knew who did that and what it entailed. That's my guess. Bob is more the historian to.
Yeah, no, I understand. But again, it was like basically my read on and the reason I think the rest, if I'm remembering correctly now, because it seems so long ago, the Finance Committee was, okay, yeah, the division of accounting, and they're going to be responsible for, maintaining all accounts of all transactions, pre-audit, preparation of paper. Yeah, that's what they do. So it's like, is it necessary that it's in there? Because then you have the potential for omission. So it's almost
Right.
like, that it would be subject to whatever the job description that's accepted by the Board of Selectmen, consistent with the laws of Massachusetts, would entail. To me, that was all. But, so when I'm saying looking at others, because we already ran into a situation where somebody took something out of a bylaw without checking what was in the charter. I mean, globally, there are things that really should be there, but I think when you get to the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day operations of the town, I think that gets away from that.
I would totally support picking a couple of charters that, for one reason or another, are a model. Either they're particularly brief, or particularly robust, or particularly, driving. There's 351 towns, and we can take them all to drive ourselves crazy.
Yeah.
If somebody were to say, gee, I think such and such has a great charter, I'd love to take it, and that's not that easy.
No, I know. Actually, I think I looked at, one of the ones I looked at was Air, and I was like, wow, it's like just on like this many pages. Ooh, I can read it.
It's very short.
Yeah. So it's like, even just towns that are around, it was.
And I'd also want to look at their bylaws, and maybe their bylaws are larger. It's probably compensated in some way.
Well,
There's one difference, there could be others.
Well, it could be, and I think that the reason why I go after the specificity in here is that you go after this every 10 years. Your bylaws you can change as soon as you feel like there's a need for a change. So I think it also goes back to the very beginning when we were talking about the whole notion of this is the umbrella under which all of the specifics fall. So, I mean, that was all. That was just, but I also just wanted to give people a heads up that having met with Heather already as in our committee, that might be one of the directions that she might want to have take a discussion, and it might behoove us to take a look at some other charters as we're coming in to see what it is that she might be thinking. That's all. That was basically.
You said the town manager has a presentation. What is it
No,
on?
not particularly.
Okay.
No, just to go through the...
We asked her to think about Section 4, because that talks about town manager, and the parts of Section 5 that report to the town manager position, which is the finance pieces, and anything else she wanted to add. Anything else she...
I'm just confused since it's Lunenburg's charter, that it's sort of how we define her role rather than her define her own role. Not just whether it's her or anybody else. That Lunenburg is defining...
Right, I think it's basically just also checking in on and the accuracy of the charter is what, given that it was written 10 years ago, and now this is what the town manager is responsible for based on all of the potential changes that have come up over time.
I was just curious that
This is
the
what I'm
town
doing.
defines what they want the role to be in my mind more than we'd ask her.
Well, I think it's on the execution side that if we think that there's a great plan in place, and then we hire people to execute that great plan, they can have a more hands-on experience that says, hey, there are some issues that are popping up that are interfering with what you really want me to do. And so if you can make this tweak or that tweak, it will help me do this other huge section of task or what have you. So I think even though ultimately it is the town people who get to vote on this and decide on this, that part of the critical to the process is hearing back from the people who it really affects. And this is their livelihood. And getting that feedback so that way what we're doing is better. We don't have to regard any feedback that's given to us.
I was just curious because we're not getting feedback from other employees, and I didn't know how, because other employees are in our charter.
I think we are. From on the planning side of it, I've certainly met with all of the employees, I believe, so far in this building, to get their feedback on what they think about the charter. And that's the whole building departments. And we do...
We haven't talked about, you haven't brought their
I
feedback
forwarded,
to
most
us.
people didn't have any. I did forward today some feedback from Mr. Burney, who did have, I think, 3 different suggestions. And that was emailed to you, probably 35 minutes before this meeting. So we can, probably take a look at that next time. But I don't think most people that I'm interacting with really don't have feedback, but I think people like Mr. Burney, he is saying, whoa, there's some issues with what you expect me to do and how it's currently worded.
But I don't remember assigning employees or making that a part of what we were doing, so, I mean,
At
I
the
would have
very
liked to
beginning-
participate in that as well.
At the very beginning, our first meeting, I sent this out to everyone as far as who we were going to respond to, and I got the planning departments. That was more the building departments.
Okay, I didn't know it was land use too.
Which included the land use, which included upstairs, and I even, read our zoning people, and I reached out as well, even because I was here with the Board of Health people, just to see
Have we
if they
done
had
fire chief?
any thoughts. I think that certain jobs, like that we said that we weren't going to do, such as like that the police, because they were mentioned, I know I have Chief Marino on that one, and things will get back to me, but I'm not sure about the fire chief. But I think I hear what you're saying, Katie, which is, if you have an employee, why are you asking an employee to tell you how they should make their job better? But on the other side of it, if you're asking, we have all these ideas of the town.
No, I think we should, but be
Yeah.
consistent. I just want, if we pick a path of
Well, I
getting
think,
input.
but I think in this particular case, again, you go back 10 years ago, there wasn't a town manager, so it was a creation of the position, and so it's like, okay, what's working and what's not. So I think that there's not, in that particular instance, I think, and that's really, again, one of the few positions in here that is so clearly spelled out with such a degree of specificity that, I mean, obviously the who people respond to and things, I think, belong in here, but in terms of particular jobs, and that's why I think it gets almost too specific in certain areas. I mean, certainly saying town manager is responsible to administer the town. I mean, so what does that mean? It means a lot. So you have all of these departments that answer to the town manager and the board of selectmen and the townspeople. But I think that's why you would bring somebody like Heather in to say, yeah, that whole chapter is all town manager, and is it hitting everything, or is it hitting too many things, or is it hitting things that are hit someplace else, or things like that, or there needs to be a little bit more flexibility in the language that can be specific in the bylaws. That's all. So I think, I think that Chief Marino and Chief Sullivan, I don't know how specific you would want to get in
Well, their roles
the
are
charter.
really vague in the charter. And it
Yeah,
doesn't seem much
and I think that they should
town
be.
manager. So it's just that they exist. That's kind of-
Well, yeah, you have them, but basically they have responsibilities that are spelled out, whether it's through general law and
Yeah.
responding to general laws, whether it's through the bylaws, that basically the specificity can come in other places. I think, I'm even in terms of the whole notion of committees, I would just be, okay, so you have elected committees, and then other than that, you just have a section that says the Board of Selectmen can from time to time appoint committees. And it's like, if there's work that has to be done. So it's, and that we just have a rule about
how
committees.
the charter is very verbose in some areas,
Yeah,
and then, I just wish it was the same, I like consistency.
and then there's
So
just
it
a
feels like
mission, and
there's a lot of-
but that's why I worry about specificity, because if we say, okay, you're going to do this and this and this and this, but we don't include this, does that mean that they don't have to?
But we usually have a catch-all phrase, including any other things that are...
Relative there, too.
Yeah, so...
But that's what you put in the job description.
I do like
I
all
know.
this stuff. I just do, that's me.
So if I can get back to Mr. Chair, the question, and I don't want to cut this too short, but
Oh, no, cut it.
the question was, should we consider adjourning until next meeting? I think that we should. I think that when we have a larger majority here, I know that we're all coming off the holidays. I am super tired.
I bet you are. I bet you are.
So if we not postpone, but if we save for the next meeting, because really the purpose of today was to go over with the town manager, and that was where we left off.
Yeah.
So it would be, I think, important to pick this back up when she's here. So I would support that. But before, I'm not going to make a motion because I would like for us to look at the agenda and just look at things that we can probably at this point cross off. In order to get things out, I want to send this agenda out tonight for the next meeting. That way we have it. So just looking at this agenda, is there anything up here that we're looking at that we are at the point where we can cross anything off?
With one caveat, I really believe that the responsibility for the agenda is the chair's.
It-
And what I would suggest is what we're doing now, and I think we should do it, is a suggestion to Mr. Ebersol,
Correct.
and then you and he could do that as soon as you can get it done.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Exactly.
Fine.
So even though we have the Board of Selectmen up here, I think we were kind of back and forth. I think with the supermajority, we should probably make a vote.
Okay, I thought that before we completed any action on some of these things, was that we were going to put out a survey, a
Yes.
public survey, and get input. So I think that really, we haven't ruled any of them out
No?
to say this is how we're writing the charter yet, unless you wanted to write the charter, put that out for people to survey. Or did you want to get a feel for it?
Based on the meetings we've had, surveys were the answer that we were going to go with. Well, I guess what I'm asking is if we've...
I don't think we can take it off of the agenda until we conduct the survey.
All right.
And say, oh yeah, we've decided we're going to call it the select board. Okay, then we take that off.
So just looking at this, everything so far should say here, is there anything we need to add on to it?
Yeah, I think we should conduct a survey soon on some of these items.
I think we're running out of time unless we very specifically choose to find how to engage with the community. If not, we only have about a month where there'll be time to do that before it starts to have to go to town council.
So I think that basically, the ones that I would look for a public survey on would be B and C. And I think the rest of it, I don't know. I don't know how other people feel about some of those things, but elected boards with employees, I think really, we really have to take a look at I mean, that's pretty...
That's where I'm looking for input from the town manager. I mean, in recognition of your point, not that her word is going to be the answer, but I would like to hear her input before we tackle that, because I think it's a considerable...
Right, because it came up with the whole library committee.
Right.
And librarians, and who solves a dispute when it can't be the library committee. So, and then the charter versus bylaws is, I think we'll just have to take a look at if there's stuff that we're looking at either taking in or putting out, that it's either not covered or not inconsistent with the bylaws.
Looking at our schedule of meetings, based on how we're going to rotate, February 14th will be our first meeting in February. So I think that we might want to think about pushing it up a week, because we get an extra week here, and that's what we're coming up with. Maybe the way I was looking at it was we could be every other week and do February 7th.
Bob talked about adding the 21st as a public hearing, I think. I wrote that down last time. If that's the same thing, whether we added the 7th or the 21st, but...
Of February?
Yeah. So,
He had said at this point we'd have to start adding meetings if we're going to meet
yeah, we do.
the annual town meeting.
So I would suggest that we meet on February 7th and February 21st.
As well as the 14th and
And not the 14th.
Not-
Skip the 14th. Because it being Valentine's Day, I think people may want to
Okay.
make other plans,
The 21st is school vacation, so
which is perfect.
I hope not to be here then.
We're switching to that, though, if we did this, and we're not on it if we kept our regular schedule.
Well, we can always decide.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah, we can decide after the 24th to see what's up, but I also think that by February 7th, that we should have a draft of a survey.
Okay.
Or even after the meeting with Heather, the 24th.
Looking at February this year, well, every year is 28 days. So, I mean, the 28th is also an option. So, meeting on the 4th Wednesday of the month. I'm still talking about the schedule. So,
No, I'm just saying the 24th is January.
yes, and
All right.
then looking at February,
Okay.
that we can, think of February 7th.
Okay.
and potential
Yep.
for the 28th, which is the 4th, which would normally be our regularly scheduled meeting,
Okay.
the 28th. And then also the 21st is probably an add-on as a public hearing, if that's what we were at last time. But I'm just saying, maybe tentatively, that this is what we're thinking about for the month of February, 3 meetings. But skipping the 14th and doing
I would rather skip vacation and do it on Valentine's.
Well, when we
Sorry.
I was just going to say, whatever meeting you have, I don't think you have a public hearing on the 21st. Because that's
No,
vacation.
Right.
Okay.
I think that, yeah, I think that the 28th would be, if we're doing a public hearing, what are we doing a public hearing on? I
don't
guess,
know, but I don't know.
well, unless that's what we meet on the 7th to determine what is going to be on the public hearing on the 28th.
And if we did a public hearing, we'd probably not want to have it here, maybe. I don't know how popular it would be, but book it on a Wednesday when we could be somewhere.
Yeah, so we can look at their schedule for next month. If we, yeah, so I can figure that out and see if that's actually feasible to do on that day or not. Okay, so adding on, and I'll send this over to Mr. Ebersol, and, he'll make the decision if we're, what the agenda is. But for adding, I'll basically discuss posting a town survey and then making notes at upcoming meetings. Tentatively, we're looking at February 7th, 21st, and 28th.
Our regular meeting would be 14 and 28 though, so
Yes.
we're canceling Valentine's.
Yes.
I would just celebrate it on the 16th. Happen to remember late, but... Yeah. It's not like you're saying...
It doesn't matter, we're going to have budget hearings all month
Yeah.
on Thursdays, so.
I think there was a big finance committee meeting on Valentine's Day last year, if I remember correctly.
Was it?
Yeah. It was like a joint something, or I don't know.
Could have been. It was probably the budget presentation, because we have the 5-year forecast coming up in 2 weeks.
I want to promote some local business here for Valentine's Day, so I encourage you guys to
Find a local restaurant to go take somebody out to dinner to.
or get a gift card from.
Yes.
So the 24th is probably important that we have as close to full attendance as possible, the 24th of January. Is everybody at this table tonight planning on being here at the moment?
Yes.
January 24th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Planning on it, let me give you.
Yeah, right.
Let me tell you for sure. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Because maybe what we can do, it'll be a long night, but maybe we can do some sorting at the end of the town manager part.
Okay.
In terms of, what impact do we have left to survey or put on public hearing schedule or whatever.
Yeah, because did Bob think we were going to be ready for a public hearing of some sort?
I don't know, that's the first time I've heard.
I wrote it down
public
for, when we were talking about the timeline, he said maybe we could add the 21st, but we probably weren't thinking about February vacation. He said we'd have to start adding, and I wrote public hearing.
Oh, maybe he meant because we were going to have to be, in order to be ready, I don't know when the public hearing would have to happen.
Well, because the date that it would have to sort of be completed by, to like have it ready in time for the town to review was like March 24th or something.
Okay,
And so we need it before that to go back and forth between town council.
okay.
So it was like March 24th, it would be like hopefully completely done, so we can have a government.
Okay,
My packet coming,
Yes.
Yes.
He's 15 minutes behind.
that's okay, but we were almost getting here in time to make a motion to adjourn. Unless-
Really? I thought Heather was going to be here tonight.
No, because we had an attendance problem, we pushed her up till next week. Because Bob and Steve knew they weren't coming, and we just found out you guys were going to be late.
Yeah.
But maybe we can vote a couple things. I just feel like we're never actually moving forward, like we're kicking cans.
Well, I think some of the meetings, I mean.
And I'm
today
feeling
was
worried.
Christmas.
Yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, we're going to have meetings through the
I
first.
worried about not having a quorum, but I thought if Heather was going to be here, I'd want to fight for as much of it as I could. It was our final meeting, so we
Right.
kind of had
Are you
to go.
okay? Do you feel sad? Is it sad?
I tell you what, it's been 6 years.
Wow.
So it was a little bit,
Since we launched that.
Wow.
It's got to be a sense of
Bittersweet.
accomplishment, though.
It is
Yeah.
$4.4 million under budget.
wonderful.
That's something.
You really want that public right now? Is it 5
No, no,
months?
that's not public.
Well, you're on TV. Well, you're not on live.
We need it. It's not live. They'll just know by tomorrow.
I've heard from the semi-reliable source.
Well, that's a big accomplishment.
It is.
And the school is amazing, like out of a movie set. That's why I was there today, and that's what you sort of feel like you're in like a TV movie because everything's so nice. And even, when you're pulling up in the granite benches, you feel like it's more of a set of the school.
Yeah,
than
I said to
actual
my
school.
kids, you're very lucky. You have a really nice building and a lot of people to thank.
It's a
So,
beautiful
very lucky.
opportunity for the children.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for your hard work.
Right, thank you very
It
much.
was fun.
And the front's spectacular, but I always like to say my favorite view is from Turkey Hill. Looking back up at it, it's amazing from
That is a nice
back there
view.
too. It's a really interesting view of the school.
Gives a kid something to aspire to.
I'm not going to say this on TV.
Mr. Chairman,
For after.
I move that we adjourn.
Let's talk to Mark.
Okay.
Well, what we were just talking about was our timeline, and that's one of the things I'm worried about. And so we're getting ready to maybe wrap up this meeting without having, again, accomplished any specific concrete idea of how we're moving forward. We haven't taken a single vote.
Well,
We don't have a public outreach plan.
Right.
And it's like a tick-tock, like we just keep, this was supposed to be a big night. We're supposed to get a lot of, the feedback and probably pull a lot together. Now that's going to be another 2 weeks from now, so.
Well,
Yeah.
I would add a couple thoughts real quick. The first being that, we're not really hard and fast and furious stuck to this timeline of town meeting in May. That is a flexible goal, that, the charter is something that's reviewed every 10 years, that we can choose to take 5 months to do this, or we can choose to take a lot longer to do
Were
that.
you here last week?
I was not. but
Okay,
I-
we talked a lot about the timeline.
We did, and I did
Okay.
see that, and it was in the minutes, and I saw in the meeting that we were all kind of in a consensus. That's what it seemed like, that we were going to try to shoot no matter what for annual town meeting. And I'm adding in my input that I think that we should not be so rigid on that goal. If that's not where we're at, then that's just not where we're at. And that we've clearly been under the understanding that that's what we're shooting for. But if we can assess by the end of February that we're not there, then I think that we need to change that goal.
I think we need to make that decision like now-ish, so we say we're going to make that goal or we're not going to make the goal.
What's
Because
our
otherwise,
time
we
in the
will
year?
kick the can and we won't make it. But if we want to make the goal, then I think we just have to do it and have to plan accordingly.
And that's been sort of my position all along. Not that we have to make the date, but time is of the essence, and we should do what we can to try and make the date,
Yeah.
so that we don't lose momentum, so that we don't...
Make a choice to commit to it, or we might...
Well, not necessarily make a firm commitment to do it, but rather maintain a commitment to complete our work as soon as we can. And I would agree there's nothing magic about annual town meeting at the beginning of May. But I'm not prepared to say we then put it off until November or December. I think it's incumbent upon us to complete our work as soon as we can, and then to get on the calendar for a special town meeting, whether it's in the fall or whether it's in the late summer.
I wouldn't really want to bring the charter into a town meeting in the summer when so many people have booked vacations, and it feels like a difficult time of year to...
So
Like
we're damned
do a
if we
town
do
meeting.
and we're damned if we don't. And that's why time is of the essence. I'm not suggesting we compromise our work. I'm not suggesting that we arbitrarily shorten our timeline, but I think it's incumbent upon us to do the work that we have in front of us, get it done as soon as we can, and then find the right time to bring it to town meeting.
That's a good point, because the other thing that I'm not sure of is whether even the May town meeting is the appropriate time to do it. just because that's also the time we have to do the budget and anything else that might come up for a Springtown meeting.
But that's when we're driving the most attendance, and I think we should focus on when the most people are there to bring forth the most
But we
important
only
thing.
have attendance right up until noon. That's the issue.
Historically.
Yeah.
Historically.
So I think, which is another piece of it, is that, yeah, there's something to be said for having a meeting that really focuses.
And maybe that puts a different spin on what happens next. Let's say, I'm not prepared to say tonight whether we can or cannot make it for annual town meeting in the spring.
Right.
But what it might afford us is an opportunity to publicize and market and encourage as many people as possible to attend a special meeting, whenever it might be scheduled. We're not going to put it off a year, are we? Are we talking about annual town meeting 2019?
And we're also talking about potentially,
Adding.
could still be in May.
Well, that's the thing, I
It could
think-
happen.
Yeah, I'd be more comfortable if we had about 4 months to market, 3-4 months to market this.
Let me just step back one step. We've thrown a pretty wide net up until this point of brainstorming of suggestions of what could be part of this.
Yes.
You know, name changes, elected versus appointed for key positions, days of the week for future meetings, how many meetings a year we have, etc. I would venture to say how long you need to market it and how much attention you need at a particular meeting has a lot to do with whether you're pushing 1 or 2 key changes or whether you're committed that to do it right, we have to make 12 changes to our charter, in which case you might have a meeting just to do that. If this committee feels that we got to change 12 different things about the charter and they need to be marketed, I'm not sure you want to squeeze that in on a Saturday morning with the budget and 12 other things. If what we're going with is we're going to make one significant change and we have a couple of public hearings so everybody understands what that change is, then I'd feel more comfortable if it was part of a bigger meeting. But I don't think we've kind of gotten there yet.
I think that's part of Katie's point. We haven't taken any votes.
We never do anything, except talk about when we'll do it. No, I'm being serious. That's really what we've continued to do, is say, well, you know what, let's do the vote next time, or we're really at a point where we haven't made a concrete decision.
But I suggest we have had a pretty wide net.
Yes.
If we went through the list with all of us here and said, is that serious or is that something that was nice to discuss and it's not going to make the cut? After we had that discussion and that vote, I think we'd have a much clearer idea of whether it's doable to make a May timeline or any timeline.
And I don't think we're doing a constitutional convention here. I think that we are facilitating a community process. So, it takes time. It's not necessarily going to be as quick as we'd like for it to be, but we have to bring as many people as we can into this process, to solicit as many people into this process. And sometimes it's not at the pace that it would be if it was just 9 of us sitting here without having to go back to anyone of how quickly we'd be able to actually work. But I think it's this feedback that's been what the stage of this process that we've been in, or rather the phase, is in this feedback phase. And I think that from here we are going to move into, all right, we've gone through the charter, what are the things now that we're going to actually vote on? And I think that this is something that's attainable by the end of February. I'm confident that on February 28th that we're going to have a working document of where we're at. The question really is, based on the time that I saw that Kate had mentioned, is that enough time from February 28th to May, first weekend in May, to get the community involved? And I don't know if that is. Because they're hitting 2 vacations around here. We're coming off right now of this holiday season, which of course splits a lot of people out. And based on the attendance around Thanksgiving and the attendance around Christmas, that, we can't always, maybe 2 meetings in December was a lofty idea.
I think it's something to what Jamie said, though, is that we can do it if we're just tweaking and editing.
Yes.
And we can't do it if we're going to make an incredibly different charter that needs more. outreach and attention.
Correct.
You know,
But we
so
need to have
I-
9 people here before we make that call.
No.
Or 7, but it's
Or
preferable.
or
than
6
not.
people who all agree.
But 7
Well-
works. I mean, we could,
Six people who all agree, and we talked about that last time. But the ideal is we would take an official vote, a final vote, when all 9 members are present, to give everyone an opportunity to weigh in. Thinking about the timeline that Katie proposed last week, we said we would take preliminary votes on the 24th of January at our next meeting. Now that's the meeting that we're going to devote to our time with the town manager, which means we wouldn't have our preliminary vote until our next meeting. We could interject an extra meeting at the beginning of February.
That's one
to
of the
have
things
a
we did
preliminary
discuss,
vote.
is maybe that's something we could do.
And that, depending on where that vote goes, if we have a short list of substantive changes, maybe it's still doable. But if there's a long list of substantive changes, at that point, I'd be willing to say, we're not going to make it.
And I think that the biggest areas of change right now are really, unless there's something that comes up at the next meeting, are really just in the nature of the town meeting itself. And I think that's one of the things that we also wanted to get a lot of input from in terms of the scheduling of the town meeting. And I think that would be, if in the next several weeks, like if we do a question of the week, what sounds good to you, select board or board of selectmen? I mean, it's like, or, like the next one would be, do you think that we should have a time limit on town meetings? Would you be more likely to come in the evening or in the, what do you think of the idea of 2? And just get the survey out there and get some of those responses back so that we can at least start to vote on those big ticket items so that we know who is writing this? That's what I want to know. Who is actually putting the changes in?
I thought Bob was working on that, but maybe I'm being presumptuous.
I feel like Bob is
As
saying he's going to compile.
chair of the committee and attorney, he's probably in the best position to do that. If you have all of us trying to write...
Then we'll make next year's.
Right. Well, no,
I think you have to have a central point for
Right.
bringing all the verbiage together, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that it would be helpful for me to hear from Bob at this point what he thinks is doable,
Bob?
given if he's the one that's going to be,
Yeah.
tasked with writing it before the lawyers get it. But I also just think that we did say that we wanted public input, and I think if we start getting the public input now on those things that we have really talked through, we'll be more likely to be ready to vote.
Certainly.
I mean, I feel ready to vote on some of those things already, but in terms of bringing in some perspective from the town, I think that would be good.
So I'll be with Mr. Eversole, if we structure this in such a way that on the 24th of this month, that after we meet with the town manager, that we then go into the survey and we work out the details of this language with the purpose of getting that posted after the 24th of this month and before the next meeting. Then by the time we meet, we were talking about February 7th instead of Valentine's Day. So the meetings being every Wednesday in February except for Valentine's Day, so the 7th, 21st, and 28th. That between the 24th and the 7th of January, that's roughly 2 weeks, we'll have a preliminary idea of the survey by then, of where we're kind of leaning, and there are probably some things that we could, I'm sure we'll see overwhelming majorities by that point within the survey. But then by the February 7th, we can probably streamline this process down from there and make some decisions on some things.
When are we making the survey?
Well, the goal would be to make it after the 24th and post it before the 7th.
Or come on the 24th with suggested questions.
Yeah.
Come on the 24th with that. And then
We'll
we
make
can
that a note.
Yeah. And if there's any other areas of the charter that you think that we should address,
How are we doing the survey? Are we going to have like a written one available for pickup and an online one? And how will we disseminate the fact that there's a survey available?
I think we should do it online, and I think we should disseminate the same way we post town meetings. I think we should follow the same process, post surveys.
bring some surveys over to the Eagle House.
And then try to distribute certain locations, potentially.
Yeah.
Eagle House would be good.
Advertise in the
Notice in the
ledger that
ledger.
there's a survey available and how they can access it. And I'd want to do as part of that, what a charter is and why there's a survey looking for their input. I mean, because really, what percentage of people would be like, what's a charter?
Well, that's why I'm
Maybe
also
a
just-
couple of years ago, you know, like, they survey on a charter.
Well, that's why
You know, like-
let's just do one question at a time, you know.
Like, the charter is, you know, is how our town is governed, and we review it every 10 years, and we're looking for people's feedback on these, you know, I really
That's a
think
different-
sometimes things are lacking it.
That's a different process, though. That's an education process, which is not...
You can always add education into anything you're doing.
You
now.
I
can,
think
but
that makes
I
sense.
think that that's for someone to have a full, I see what you're saying, but I think that a survey is a survey in which you're assuming that people have a baseline set of knowledge. To say
No,
to
don't make an
someone-
assumption of knowledge
No,
that's
but
there.
what I'm saying is that if you have to say to someone, hey, we have a charter, and what do you think we should make, what changes should we make to it?
No, I don't
That's,
agree at all.
I'm saying that that's a
Well,
different
there's
process.
we can actually, when we post it in the ledger, it will be in the form of an article, which will say, this is what
With
the Charter Review
explanation.
Committee is
Yes,
doing.
please.
Please go to this website.
Yes.
And
Right?
Let me ask a question. What are we really going to survey?
I just thought just number 2,
I think, so
or
far...
the town meeting piece. was
Yeah,
the
Town meeting,
I think
Anything else?
Board of Selectmen name. It's not many questions. Board of Selectmen
Well, what
name.
about the town clerk issue, like these bigger things, like elected or appointed? Like,
Yeah,
why
I
would
don't
we
know if
not?
you could do that in a survey. I mean, I'm all in favor of a public hearing where somebody can come and hear that
So-
debate and be part of the process, but I'm not sure if you want to survey the only one I really think, even selectmen, the name of selectmen, I mean, that's not a survey issue, really. Town meeting, yeah, I'd really like to
Yeah.
know if people would prefer nights or Saturdays or time limits or multiple days. But some of that other stuff
I
is...
think you survey in a global way or you don't survey at all, because we shouldn't choose what we want their input on. I feel really uncomfortable with
I
that.
disagree.
I disagree.
Yeah.
I think there are public forums. If we have our open meetings, we have public forums. Anyone who's truly interested can come and provide whatever input they want. The key issue is trying to spur interest in the community, if you will, in attending and participating in town meeting. So that's where you want as broad a cross-section as possible. Everything else, you don't want to bring people who've never been involved in anything at all, trying to come in and bog down a charter review process. I think the people who are already involved and know something about the
But it's the
charter.
people that get to choose if they want the charter, and that person can be anybody.
Well, I think that's true, but I also think that, okay, so there's a public hearing. That would be, I think, a better format for questions around. One of the issues I would have with putting something like, should somebody be elected or appointed, is if you've got a position, if you're talking about a position where somebody is currently elected, then it becomes, is it about that person? And then people get really defensive or aggressive about that in a survey, because there's not enough information there exchanged.
But won't they
But
just
at a
have
public
the same
hearing, there
response
is.
if we decide something?
Well, they
and
can bring
then
that at the public hearing.
And if we don't have a feeling for it, it could bomb our process if we don't have a sense of what people are interested in. That was in that initial study that Bob sent out,
Mhm.
is that charters and things succeed if the voice is from the community, and if it's implemented from within, things often fail when it comes to charters. It was that one where it read through all towns and their process.
But those are also really dramatic changes to town charters.
But that would be a dramatic change, appointed versus elected town clerk. So I'm just using that as an example, that if you do a dramatic change, but the driving force is because the community wants to see that,
Yeah.
that was more successful. What
Well,
was
the
the
article was
college that
changing
did that
forms
study?
of
I can't
government.
remember the name of the study he had circulated, but they specifically said that when you're making a large change, historically, and they gave so many examples, it would fail if you did something dramatic and it was decided on a smaller scale. But if it was a large voice that was asking for it, especially in the change of the government forms, they succeeded when people were more involved.
Just, so if I could just,
Yeah.
I think the reason that it's best to concentrate on the town meeting is you were talking about, the voice of the people. The problem is we're not getting people to town meeting. And that's the issue that we're trying to see if there's something in the charter that might help ensure that more people show up to town meeting. I mean, we have meetings where we lose, meeting after meeting where we lose quorum. I mean, even the last one, which is a fairly highly attended meeting, there was 160 people out of 5,000 plus registered voters.
7,000.
So I think that it's a worthwhile thing to concentrate on because it affects the most people. Why aren't they showing up?
But you're saying you're looking for the voice of the people but don't want to survey them.
No,
There's a difference between asking for the voice of the people and a survey. A survey is a very blunt instrument.
it is.
It's not a democratic instrument.
No.
It's an instrument for people to voice an opinion, okay? And it doesn't really, it's not even necessarily, when you do a Survey Monkey type of online survey, it's not even really scientifically valid. But it tells us something.
So will the input on any, I mean, I don't know, I'm just...
I think, I want to add a couple thoughts. I think that I hear what you're saying, Katie, and I agree with your notion. I think that using the document that Mr. Ebersol provided, that was a document about changes of government. And, to me, I don't know if changing a town clerk to being elected or not elected is comparable to a change in government.
It is.
And I think that probably is up for discussion. But, so I would, I guess, I agree as well with you, Mr. Mackin, that a survey is a survey. That, the proper protocol that we're supposed to follow to get feedback is in an open meeting setting. So that is what the state dictates. And that can't be substituted for a survey. And I don't think that we should attempt to substitute it for a survey. I think that we should follow the rules that are set in
I
front of us.
didn't say to not have a public forum or
but a survey
represent
is
rules.
a very specific tool in which you can get some feedback about a very specific topic. That you're not going to be able to get a global assessment of a community from a survey. That you're hitting there's a disconnect in our town between who is showing up to town meeting and who is actually on social media. So, if we're doing any kind of survey on social media, what's the translation of these personnel actually coming and voting for something? So, we have to hit the people at the senior center because, I looked around the room at our last meeting and I think the mean age was probably above 60, or close to it. So, I think that we have to hit people who are, in different walks of life. We have to take things, meet people where they are. And I don't know if the answer is only a survey.
Well, right.
Say only a survey.
But I think it's just, and I'm saying that.
And I would say not to do a survey at all, I'd be comfortable with. It's just, I'm not comfortable not reaching out to, I would like to know, even if it's just coming in the same format as people's opinion of town meeting, I would like to see if there's any sort of, huge lean in one way or another on a variety of things, not one specific thing. That's all I'm saying. I just thought it would be interesting to see how people respond.
What I'd like to see is to get a public forum established and to see who shows up and what they have to say.
So
That's kind of the best gauge. Is there any interest in changing the town clerk from elected to appointed? If nobody shows up to talk about that matter, then people don't care about it. Or any of the other substantive changes that we're talking about. And I'm not convinced there are any big substantive changes. Perhaps that's one. If
And we haven't actually
hold
taken a vote on whether we're supporting that or not.
that we haven't taken our position because we haven't had a chance to.
Right. So we've yet to take a position on it.
Right.
which I don't think we should until we hear from the community.
Right.
But you just said you didn't want to hear from them.
No, I said that I don't think that the survey is the mechanism. The mechanism is an open meeting. that's the mechanism to hear feedback from the community, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, that, you're getting into worlds. I'm more willing to fill out a survey online than I am as willing to show up at a meeting, right? And so what you're trying to gauge is the people who are going to come to the meeting to vote on these things, what their opinions are, but how do you reach those people? And those people are participating in they're watching what we're doing. They're coming to our meetings, and we can reach those people. But if we do a survey online, we could hit 4,000 people in the town of Lunenburg, and not one of them could show up at a town meeting in the spring.
I don't think that lessens their importance.
It doesn't lessen their
Members of the
importance, but
community.
what it comes down to is, in my view, is we have to get things to pass. And that's the whole goal why we created the supermajority. We need things to pass. We have to consider not just who we're representing, but who's voting. That it's a two-part round.
And we also have to consider what changes are we expected or potentially proposing to make. We didn't take a formal vote, but we pretty much agreed by consensus that we're not going to change our basic form of government from annual town meeting to some other form. We're not going to go to representative town meeting. We pretty much said that without a vote.
Yeah.
Well, what if there's a groundswell in the town to change that? Would we be receptive to it? I think we'd have to. But short of that's not likely to happen. I think
in the unlikely event that it happened.
So if we think about what are the contentious issues, the town clerk might be one. And I don't know if there's a groundswell one way or another. I don't even know what the merits are one way or another.
And we don't have any, and in this case, have no consensus.
Yeah, we were split.
So what would compel us to change?
Right.
Is where I come down.
Exactly.
And if there's no groundswell to make a change or not make a change, then why is it even on the agenda?
So in the
And the only reason it's on the agenda is because towns are basically 50-50 in which form they take.
Right.
Well, there are also 20% of the towns that have gone to representative town meeting, and we've chosen not to. What would compel us to change? A groundswell from the community. If there is no groundswell from the community, I don't know why we're talking about changing it.
And that's exactly what that study said, is when it comes
Right.
from the community, then
Right.
it happens.
Right. So,
Yeah,
unless I see a groundswell.
I'm sure you
The
would
only reason it got on the
support
agenda was that it was something that was actually proposed 10 years ago, and there was arguments made for it. I only raised it because it had been something discussed 10 years ago and rejected.
That's right.
It wasn't because I personally believe that there's
Yeah.
a need for a change.
Right.
And I'm also sure that you would support, we had a gentleman from the Cemetery Commission kind of make a note that, our charter is missing one word, the word soul, S-O-L-E, that should say soul something. I think that there's these little small tweaks that, I don't think you're going to get a groundswell of people to ever come in here to say, you know what, Cemetery Commission really should say soul, they're missing that word. But these
That
are
is an
small
important
little...
word, though, because it does change some things.
It is, but these are small little things that I think that, we might...
Small, non-controversial,
Exactly.
almost like technical fixes.
Yes.
So,
And that seems to be the direction that we've been moving in, is that nothing dramatic's coming out of this committee, that this is going to be a pretty, let's tweak, that no one's complaining, no one's saying everything's all messed up, so let's just look at what we got, let's see if there's any fine-tuned touches here, and then, that seems to be how we've been progressing.
yes and no. I agree with that generally, but at our last meeting, we did have some discussion around that very thing. And Jamie mentioned earlier about going through and seeing where we're ready to take a vote to not change in certain areas, to make a stylistic change or a subtle change in some areas. And are there any substantive issues or substantive changes that we would propose? divide them into those three categories. Here's the stuff we know we're not going to change. Here's the stuff we need to tweak to either be consistent or to clarify the language. And then here's the things of substance where we really need to have.
And I bet within 45 minutes of the next meeting, we could get past those first two categories.
In lightning speed.
And probably have a fairly short list.
Short list of the other ones.
In the latter category.
Right. I think that's a good approach.
Yeah.
Think about it in those terms.
So what I heard, and let me just play it back because I wasn't here for the whole meeting. We pushed our meeting with the town manager off until the 24th of January, which is our next meeting. That's going to consume a full night's worth of agenda, and I think that's reasonable. And there may be a fair amount of tweaks in the language of town manager responsibilities. And I don't know if any of that's going to qualify for substantial or substantive change, but I'm sure there'll be a fair number of tweaks there. The following meeting, which would be February 7th, we would run down the list and categorize. No change, stylistic change, substantive change. And that kind of lays out our remaining work.
I think it's a good approach.
Let me bring up a different angle. I agree with everything you just said. I'm taking this a slightly different direction. I think that at least some of the work of this committee is not, hey, let's think about what might be fun to change. It's seeking out people who do this work every day and saying, is there change that would make the town better, either more effective, more efficient, more cost-effective, or whatever. And this group say, is that something that we can fashion in such a way to present it to the town, to say, here's something that inside baseball, this group of people really understand and want to word it slightly differently and then bring it to the town. And what I'm thinking of is this whole, and I think it'll come up in next week's discussion with the town manager, the whole relationship between employees that work for the town and are therefore under the jurisdiction of the town manager, ultimately, the hierarchy of the town, but who deliver services to committees and boards. And we have one or two in almost every, we have them in PAC, we have them in cemetery, we have them in parks, we have them in planning. And to solidify that whole discussion that we often put into buckets, like what's policy setting and what's operational, or what's the service level agreement between employees that work for the town and work that's done in service of committee-like things, parks, cemeteries, etc. That's something that I don't think a survey or a groundswell is going to identify. It's something that people that work in the town are going to say, hey, we need to clarify this, and here's some language that helps us clarify it. And this group who were sent here, at least some of us were sent here to represent particular constituencies, organizations. Some are here to represent the community at large. But we can then kind of shape that and say, yeah, that's something that we want to bring before the town. And that to me is a little different than, hey, what would the town really like to see us do?
I agree.
And I can see that going out next week. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
It's probably not even on the radar yet, but it may be part of our charter.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but in those cases, I would categorize the groundswell as being those boards and committees that feel they have a concern.
Okay,
There's
fine.
where the groundswell
Okay,
comes from.
fine.
So Board of Conservation,
Mhm.
right? We have a conservation agent who works for the town, but really works for the Conservation Board. What role do they have
Right.
over, or what say do they have over that role?
And what administrative relationship is there between the conservation agent and the town manager in terms of...
Right, and that's likely to be more controversial than parks, where the Parks Commission has already said, we don't have any employees. That's not a concern. They report to DPW, and DPW manages the operational aspects of their work, and they're fine with it.
Right.
And we're in the same boat in planning. I mean, we've had active conversations, with the town manager about the fact that the wording of the charter is not working for us, and that we want wording that more closely resembles the setup that the Board of Selectmen have with their staff. And that, for us, is really the only thing so far that we really care about for the planning board, and to standardize this language across the board. Now, if we have to, and on some side now, we do have to explain to the townspeople why we want to make these changes. But if you're asking us to do our job as members of the planning board, you're asking different entities to do their job, I think that it's in the town's best interest to listen to the people that they've put in these roles and to hear what we're saying to them, which is, these are some changes that we really need. Now, are we really looking for anyone in the community to spend the energy, time, and effort doing this really thorough, detailed, project into, well, this, maybe if you did it. No, I think that what the town's looking for is for us to provide valid recommendations to them, and if it's something that they can chew and swallow, then they'll chew and swallow, and if it's not, then they won't. And so, I think that government, I don't know, I think it works a little differently. I think, people do have strong opinions about different things, but that's what you see at town meeting when it comes to the parks, when it comes to, as you noted, Kate, the preservation, the shortcomings that we have in this town. That's when you might get the passion, but you're not going to get a lot of passion from community members over the dynamic between the members of the planning board and the land use director. That's a very boring issue for most people.
And that's why I'm saying that's where the groundswell comes from.
Right.
From that committee, from that board.
But there is some inside baseball work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and a fair amount of room for debate. A fair amount of room for debate on that. So I think that's a good example. There are other good examples. I'd just kind of like to see, I like to categorize things. Kind of divide and conquer. Here's the stuff we don't have to worry about. Here's the stuff we need to worry about a little bit. Here's the stuff we need to really worry about.
Right, exactly. Well, it'll help us focus in on, okay, we've all got a consensus on this, we've got consensus on this. Here's the issues we have to grapple with, and how do we get there?
In the public hearing, I agree. I like what you said about the town manager, about the town clerk, because I feel very strongly that I'm never going to say the town clerk should ever be anything but elected. Right, and I feel, so count me out on making that change. But if we had a public hearing and everyone came and stood up, including the town clerk, and said, this should be something different, I'd probably change my opinion that I feel very strongly about right now.
But what about inside baseball? What if the town manager and the accountant and the building inspectors and people that deal with it every day say it would work a whole lot better if it was elected or appointed, whichever way they would go. Why would you, as John Q. citizen, unless you had a real passion, disagree with that?
You wouldn't.
That's kind of the point I was trying to make, is if somebody makes a rational case, this group, who have spent the months it takes to read through it and understand it and will listen to the inside baseball discussion, should be the ones that recommend it to the town, and unless we totally miss something, the town should probably say, yeah, go ahead.
They're chew and swallow.
Yeah.
So just to turn that around a little bit, the role of this board is to listen to any groundswell for change and make a recommendation, take a vote on our recommendation as to whether to accept that change or to reject it. After hearing all the arguments, pros and cons.
I agree.
I have one thing I would like to say too. If there was a groundswell, wouldn't it possibly already exist? Like, instead of to go look for it, and it goes back to that study, if the town was upset with the fact it had an elected town clerk, I feel like that we would know that. Like, there would be that element of groundswell existing amongst us, and we would know that it was there. I don't know if you can seek the groundswell, so to speak.
I would
To some degree.
sort of agree with that.
But if you have the people...
We've heard from the planning board that they have a concern that they want
Like,
to
the
raise.
concern would exist if there
Right.
were a concern.
The only, to Mike's point, The only reason the town clerk thing came up is because it's come up in the past, not necessarily because there's groundswell.
Yeah, because I've never heard anybody
Nor
in any
have I.
context talking
Nor
about
have I.
it.
That was
Even
the
in
first time.
even in the inside.
The first time
Even on the inside.
Interesting enough, the first time I heard about it was I went to get sworn in for this committee, and Kathy had a reaction. He said, well, I know what's going to be on the agenda. And I thought, wonder what that is. And then I heard town clerk appointed versus elected. So
There was a
And she
private.
posted the agenda.
she knew that there were people that have raised the issue, but I hadn't heard that. And maybe there is no groundswell.
And I would think of you as being a part of the group of people who are inside your finance committee, and like, so that's what I'm saying, that if some of these things existed, they would exist.
Well, I think that we haven't had that conversation thoroughly about.
Well, and to be fair, there have been discussions over the years about would it be advantageous to have it as an appointed position in the sense that then it would be overseen and directed by the town manager and the board of selectmen. And there's good arguments to be made for that. Again, I'm not positing a position on it, I'm just telling you that that discussion has happened over a number of years. That thing didn't pop out 10 years ago just because they didn't like the current office holder. It was because people...
And as Michael just said, and I'm not sure everybody caught it, we haven't really had that debate.
Right.
And we haven't had anybody present either side of
Correct.
of the discussion
Right.
to us.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So I'm agnostic at this point.
So we should wait for hear what the town manager has.
Right.
Or whoever has, a groundswell doesn't have to be 90% of the town. It could be one person with a real huge issue,
Yeah.
and we should listen to them and find out.
And like the town manager works for the town, so it's not her decision. If
But she
there's
might
an
have
appointed,
input.
she might have
That's all.
input, but at
That's
the
what she
same
does
time,
for
I
a
think
living.
that there's an...
Well, you see, I don't want to make the argument here and now, because I'm agnostic as well.
Yeah.
But the town clerk is kind of the only job in town that answers to nobody but the voters.
Right, and the voters is the
But
town.
even selectmen and, no, but even...
No, we are, and we...
Yeah, once every 3 years.
Yeah. once
So if you don't like
We
something...
have to wait 4 years for a president of our country. That's democracy. That's
Right,
how
but that's
all
the
established-
president. This is a town
The
clerk.
president's like way huger.
This is a town clerk, okay? And if the town clerk does something that, or conducts the business in a way that's inappropriate.
The president does. It's fair point. Sorry.
Okay. It's fine.
Democracy.
Actually, we don't have a democracy, we have a real, except for town
Representative
meeting.
Republic.
Whatever Republic.
Except for town meeting, that's the only, so.
We the
Mr. Chair, I
people.
move that we adjourn this meeting.
I'll second. I'm sorry. Public comment?
We do have public comment.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is there any public comment?
Yes, Rhonda Lucio, 181 Reservoir Road.
Why don't you come around here so you can be seen?
As long as it's still recording. I just wanted to say, I am just an average member of the public, and I've attended almost all of the meetings, and I will be recommending a change to the charter, and it's something I feel strongly about. And I don't know if offended is the right word, but I'm just a member of the public, and I do feel like my opinion would be just as important as someone else's. So I hope that the committee will take it into consideration. Thanks.
Yeah. And I would like to respond to you. I think your opinion is, everyone's opinion, I think, is equal. Every voter's opinion in this town is equal to one another. But what I really like about our town government is that you really only need to get yourself and 9 other people to agree with you on any one topic, and it comes before the whole town at a town meeting. And I think that that is a real virtue within our system of government. And it is why we are probably the closest form to a true democracy that there could be. Because everyone really does, I believe, have a voice. Whether we agree or not, everyone gets to be heard.
I would just ask, is there a particular opportunity that you're waiting for to raise that concern that you have?
I guess I was just waiting for maybe the public hearing.
I would offer that you don't have to wait until the public hearing. Part of the reason for public comment is to make us aware of concerns in the community so that we have a sense of where people are at. We certainly intend to have a public hearing, but you don't necessarily need to wait for that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, beginning of every meeting, there's opportunity for public comment.
If it's posted. Sorry, Karen. She got our poster up. It's just a joke. Relax.
Is there any public comment from the committee?
No, I would just again go back to encourage people to, well, actually, maybe not. Maybe, never mind, I have no comment.
I have a comment, and my comment is that I'm new to wanting to be involved and having a voice, and so many people have told me that since I'm not involved, I shouldn't have one, or I haven't been involved, don't have one. And that actually happened to me yesterday in a very specific situation where somebody said, well, you haven't had a voice, so why are you having one? And it was by somebody important, and it was like one of those extremely shocking moments where it goes over again and again, where you say, I didn't have a voice, or I wasn't involved, and therefore I can't be. And that's been the nature of my entire year. And so when I sit here tonight and say, I want to reach out, I want to be more lay in the way we represent things so we can reach more people and ask more people. There's a lot of feedback tonight that said, don't ask more people, don't reach out to more people. And then at the same time we say, not a lot of people come. We got to do this on the inside. And so I don't understand how we can have the desire to grow and hear a voice, and then I can say through an experience of an entire year of intense involvement, I've had a lot of really negative things happen to me this year. And I just feel like if that's the experience for other people who try to come in, I don't know if we're really seeking to grow what it is we want to have as a part of our government, or our voice, or our democracy, or it's just from a personal opinion, a lot of what I heard tonight of wanting to just hear what we want to hear. I don't know, I feel like the whole goal should always be, what does our 12,000 want? And why would we ever not want to know what they want? And that's just how I feel. I would always want to know what everybody wants to know, because I wouldn't want to think I was making a decision based on only the people who knew there was a decision to be made. Because somebody might feel very passionate, but they're just not aware that their opportunity was there. And I would never be afraid to hear from all 12,000 in any context, in any survey. Because how is this Lunenburg not theirs just because this isn't their passion to spend their time this way? It doesn't mean the town's not as important to them.
I certainly agree we need to hear from all 12,000 if they're willing to speak up.
But they may not know they can speak, or they may get told they shouldn't be. And that's personal
If
experience.
they're told they shouldn't be, I don't get that. But, the opportunity is there, the information's out there. If people don't read it, they don't pay attention. There's only so much you can do.
But if we don't put it there, they can't read it.
Again, I don't want to belabor the point. I hear your point. You feel that the committee tonight was saying we don't want to hear from people. I don't think that's what was being said. I don't think that was being said at all. It was how do we best get information out, and input back, and how it comes in a form that is useful. It's also our desire to educate the public as part of our process. And a public forum, I think, is a good way to do that. It was really just about the form of which we are seeking feedback. It wasn't to exclude anybody. And so I hear your point, but I don't believe that that's what the committee was attempting
I don't
to
think
do
you should
tonight.
ever seek information from trying to get specific people's feedback. A lot was said tonight where we're looking for the information from the people we want to get it from. And
Well, no, I'm also reacting to the fact that you said that, well, there's no groundswell. Well, and then why would you seek a groundswell when there isn't one? I agree with you. That's exactly the point. We have certain things that we want to accomplish, Why are we going to put out a survey? Again, I don't want to belabor the point on the survey. We just disagree on the process, not on the idea that we want to have people a part of this. We have it televised, and it will be televised again. We ask people who are watching to give us their input. We are always seeking input. I put an article in the Ledger when we started. I don't think we got any response out of that. We can continue to do that, and we will continue to do that. I'm sure we'll be advertising the public forum, and that would be another opportunity for us to do an outreach to the community. It's just the method in which we go about it. There's no debate on our desire
I
to
just
seek
hope that when
input.
we get feedback, there won't be the sense that we tell them, since they're not here or they don't know, that just leave it to us, because we do.
Well, I don't think anyone here has expressed any view of arrogance to like that. So I don't know if anyone, I haven't heard that. I've heard very open, receptive individuals in this meeting. I think, Katie, that, we're both new to this process. And what I've come to believe is that I have a lot of ideas, right? And so do you. And we clearly don't agree on several things. And that's okay. I think that what we have to do in our process, all of us, is we have to be willing to have an opinion and also listen to what other people have to say, and be willing to gauge where our opinion stands in the mix. If we find ourselves in the minority on a view in a group this small, we have to be able to just move on from that topic. And, if there's not overwhelming consensus, we're not going to beat 7 people
I'm not talking
into
about
an agreement.
opinions, I'm just talking about outreach
Well,
and my passion for that.
Well, I just want to...
Because that's not me not having an opinion. That's me wanting to know as much as possible from as many. So I don't want to... I've been very, very specific about some things I've advocated for, and that's not what I'm doing here. In this context of charter review, I'm saying outreach is something that I think should be a goal of the town. Every chance we get.
Your comment has sparked a public comment or board comment from me, so I'm just trying to get through.
I just want to make sure we're not going in the direction of where I have opinions, because I'm not talking about municipal land preservation. We can do that later.
No,
I'm talking about charter review and outreach, and that I think that we should really aspire to educate and outreach more. And that's how we started this charter review committee, was trying to talk about how do we grow the people who are coming, how do we get more people to want to know what a charter is. And so I don't think it's about saying, well, if you don't know what a charter is, then you shouldn't want to know what a charter is. And I don't like hearing it. We started off, I feel like, really excited about how do we grow our town's involvement, and that's why we started to talk about not going towards representatives, because that, and Mr. Archibald talked a lot about that our goal should be to grow the people who want to be engaged, and I think that's all with outreach and education, and being more open to the fact of letting people in the fold so that they can be part of inside baseball. Because I don't like the word inside.
My comment wasn't directed as a feedback to you. I thought that you were finished with your comment, and I was just making my own as a standalone. But in my view, I think it's important for us just to be able to listen to one another, to be able to hear what's actually being said, and to not try to translate what we're hearing, to just hear what is actually being said, and give people the benefit of the doubt all the time. Most intentions are not evil, they're not sinister. I mean, I drive to work every day, right? And I work now down in Cambridge, and I'm passing thousands of cars. And what I notice every day is that most people want to get to work on time. It's not bumper cars out there, right? It is our nature to not want to actually actively harm one another. That's just not what we really do. When we go to the grocery store, we're not having all these, we have a lot of guns in town. We're not killing each other in the stores. Like, human beings are generally peaceful people. There are exceptions. We're generally peaceful. We generally want to go along. We generally want to get along. So I think that it's important to give people the benefit of the doubt. I may not know all of you guys personally, but I know that someone in your life cares about you, someone in your life loves you, and that there are things in your life that matter to you, right? So I'm going to give you that respect as another human, to not degrade in this moment. You may say something off kilter, you may not word things the best way, but I'm going to give you the respect of humanity to say, you know what, you might just be having an off moment, maybe I didn't hear that correctly, and that's how I'm going to proceed. So you always will get the benefit of the doubt, and I think it's important for us to give one another the benefit of the doubt. These sometimes are long days. I know many of us, we're up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and so by the time we're sitting here at 9 o'clock at night, we've been on the go for a long time. I get that everyone's in different walks of lives. Not everyone is going to be interested in what we're doing, but I think that people care about the product. They care about the result. They care about the fact that we are well-intentioned people who are coming here with no money, we're not getting paid to do this, that we have a passion to represent. We have a passion to represent the overall interests of the community. And I think we have to trust that we're all doing that. And we may not all do it the right way, but that's what we're all trying to do.
Did I hear a motion to approve?
You did. And there was no second.
I will second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.